Imagine living in a world where stealing a loaf of bread might get you thrown into a river, inside a sack, with a snake, a monkey, a dog, and a chicken. Welcome to the wonderful world of ancient justice. Today we're diving into the utter chaos that is the history of law. From prehistoric punch-ups to medieval torture parties to modern debates about whether AI can sue you. Yes, that's a real thing now. So grab a gavel, hide your goats, and prepare to be amazed by how truly unhinged humanity's legal history is. Let's rewind way back. We're talking cavemen, saber-toothed tigers, no Wi-Fi. Back then, if you did something wrong, there were no laws. There were no judges. There was just Steve, the tribe's angry rock thrower who decided justice with his fists. These early humans lived in tiny groups, and their version of law was basically, don't be a jerk, or we throw you out. And considering outside had wolves, starvation, and probably Steve still waiting to fight, he behaved. This was called customary law. It wasn't written down. It was just stuff everyone kind of knew. Like don't steal meat, respect the elders, and don't flirt with the chief's wife. And in some early societies, there was surveillance. Ancient Egyptians built literal watchtowers into their temples to keep an eye on workers, thieves, and probably the priests sneaking extra wine. So yeah, prehistoric society didn't have laws, but it absolutely had snitches. Then came civilization, writing, taxes, and with them new challenges. Around 2100 BCE in Mesopotamia, a king named Ur-Nammu decided it was time to move past blood feuds and introduce a new idea. Compensation. If someone was killed, there was a fine. If someone's arm was broken, there was a fine. Even stepping on a farmer's goat could mean a fine. This was the beginning of a more organized approach to justice. It was similar to having an early version of an HR department, but with spears. Soon after, Babylon introduced its own system, bringing a new level of formality to the process. Hammurabi's Code appeared in 1754 BCE, carved in stone. It included 282 laws, many of which were strict and severe. For example, stealing could mean death. Cheating on a spouse could also mean death. Even minor offenses like bumping into someone's ox and not apologizing could still get you in trouble. The famous phrase, an eye for an eye, was meant literally. If you injured someone's eye, yours would be injured in return. It was about equality. Hammurabi's approach was direct. If you broke the rules, there were real consequences. At the same time, the Hebrews developed laws focused on ethics, such as the 10 Commandments. Don't steal, don't kill, don't lie in court, and respect your family. These laws emphasized moral behavior, but punishments could still be harsh. For example, working on the Sabbath could result in stoning. Today, that would be like facing severe consequences for answering work emails on a Saturday. The evolution of written law marked a turning point in history, shaping how societies would handle justice for generations to come. Now let's visit ancient Rome. These were the people who turned lawmaking into an art form. They had the 12 tables written in 449 BCE and were obsessed with legal structure. It was basically the IKEA catalog of justice. But while the laws looked neat, the punishments were pure nightmare fuel. Steal as a slave. You could be branded, right on the face. Commit parricide. Killing your parents, you'd be sewn into a sack with a bunch of animals and tossed into a river. That's not punishment. That's a Greek myth. And for criminals, there were gladiator arenas, public executions as entertainment. Imagine going to a football game where the halftime show is just Gary getting eaten by a lion. But before we gallop into medieval madness, we have to make a pit stop in ancient Greece because there was one guy who really raised the bar on legal harshness. His name was Draco. And no, not the Harry Potter one, though he was just as dramatic. Draco was an Athenian lawmaker around 621 BCE who looked at Hammurabi's eye for an eye and thought, that's nothing. He wrote Athens' first written laws and made almost every crime punishable by death. Steal a cabbage? Death. Insult someone's beard? Probably death. Forget to say bless you after someone sneezes? Not confirmed, but based on the rest, probably also death. Legend has it that Draco's laws were written not in ink but in blood. And honestly, based on the punishments, that makes sense. The word draconian comes from him. So the next time someone says a rule is a bit draconian, just remember, the original Draco would have executed you for jaywalking. And here's where it gets wild. Draco's influence didn't end with ancient Greece. Medieval lawmakers looked back at his style and thought, brutal punishments do keep people in line. So when the Middle Ages rolled around, you got things like trial by fire, public floggings, and machines designed just to turn people into human spaghetti, all carrying a bit of that ancient Greek death for everything spirit. Thanks, Draco. Really. Then came the Middle Ages, when people decided justice should be both spooky and confusing. Laws were a mess. There was Byzantine law, canon law from the church, feudal law, and local customs, all clashing like a medieval legal mosh pit. But let's talk about the punishments, because they were truly wild. Trial by ordeal was basically the legal version of let's see if God likes you today. Accused of theft, you might have to hold a red-hot iron bar. If your hand healed cleanly in 3 days, you were innocent. If not, you were guilty, and now you also had no hand. Trial by water meant being tied up and thrown into a river. Sink and you were innocent. Float and you were a witch. Yes, they actually punished you for being buoyant. Torture was also completely legal. If you didn't confess, they'd stretch you on the rack until your bones popped like bubble wrap. Still wouldn't confess. They'd use the pair of anguish, a metal device they'd insert somewhere and then crank open. And if you were convicted of treason in England, things got even worse. You'd be hanged, drawn, and quartered. That meant being hanged, but not to death. Then having your guts pulled out and burned in front of you. And finally being cut into 4 pieces, with your limbs sent around the kingdom. Just imagine getting a letter. Hi, here's a leg. Don't mess with the king. In the 1600s and 1700s, people started to ask a big question. What are we actually doing? This was the Enlightenment, a time when philosophers like John Locke began to challenge old ideas. Maybe people have natural rights. Maybe government shouldn't boil people. And maybe government shouldn't boil people. And maybe, just maybe, torture is actually bad. Locke, Montesquieu, and others introduced radical ideas, separation of powers, trial by jury, freedom of speech, and not executing people for being left-handed. These ideas became the foundation for modern constitutions, like the U.S. Constitution and France's Declaration of the Rights of Man. By the 1800s, legal systems started to look much more like what we have today. Prisons became common, judges wore robes, laws were written more clearly, and reform became more important than revenge. Then came international law. After 2 world wars and a global genocide, the world finally decided to get some real rules. The United Nations was created. Human rights became international law. For the first time, Nazi leaders were put on trial, and just following orders was no longer a valid excuse. And now, the story of law is far from over. The drama continues. Today, we have civil law systems, like those in France, Japan, and most of Europe, where everything is organized by detailed codes. And then there are common law systems, like in the UK, US, and Canada, where decisions are based on previous cases. Basically, it's, what did Judge Karen do last time? But even now, our legal systems are far from perfect. Justice can be slow, expensive, and sometimes it favors the wealthy, the powerful, or whoever has the flashiest lawyer. Prisons are overcrowded. Racial and economic disparities persist. Some innocent people are still convicted, while some guilty ones go free. Our legal systems are facing challenges they were never designed for, like internet crimes, corporate monopolies, AI ethics, and even climate change. And then there are the differences between countries. In some places, chewing gum is illegal. In others, a goat needs a permit to walk down the street. Meanwhile, international law struggles to enforce anything without political drama. So yes, we've come a long way, but justice, it's still a work in progress. The next evolution of law might bring AI judges, blockchain contracts, or global digital rights. Whatever comes next, one thing is certain, we have to keep improving, because real lives are at stake. We've come 5,000 years, from tribal exile all the way to traffic court, from trial by boiling water to debates over who owns a meme. The history of law is strange, fascinating, and deeply human. It's about power, pain, progress, and the never-ending effort to stop Gary from stealing everyone's goats. If you enjoyed this journey through history, hit that like button. Subscribe for more fascinating videos, and check out the links in the description, including our socials and some bonus laws that still make no sense. Next time you grumble about jury duty, just remember, it could be worse. You could have lived in ancient Babylon. See you in court. Just kidding.